sometimes human, sometimes animal, all conceived with extraordinary imagination and a wealth of expressive detail.
Live more natural lives in their unnatural habitats.
Becoming aware of nature, of natural details, and so forth.
But whenever he can, he has to be ready to investigate the unexpected and unusual, because it may contribute to what he wants to know.
We're talking about the sorts of things that had an impact in as much as they came from one part of the world and journeyed to another and acted in the mode of impact, impulse, influence, and so on.
We want to hymn the man at the wheel, who hurls the lance of his spirit across the earth along the circle of its orbit.
I'd suggest that we should rather look for changing angles of vision.
An inventive tradition which was able to handle with considerable equanimity a long list of wonders.
Welcome! We are here with the newest episode of Administrism, a lot earlier than we did other ones, so I'm super excited. It's only been about a month, and in that time, we have been reading the book Corn is Our Blood, written by Dr. Alan Sandstrom, who, oddly enough, was one of my professors when I went to study anthropology in college. Yeah, my wife picked it up just because she thought the title was interesting, and she brought it home, and it was an ethnography by one of my professors that I didn't know, and it was fucking phenomenal, and that is what we have read for today's episode. How did you like the book, Pythia?
I enjoyed this book. It had a very sad ending, in my opinion, but it was very enlightening on how people work with the environment around them. It was very similar in some of the aspects from our prior book, how you interface with what you have, and that was where I was focused on for most of my reading.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, as the title kind of gives away, they do mention, corn is their blood. Corn is the primary thing for them. Like they take corn very seriously. And who they are is the Nahua people of the Central Highlands of Mexico. So to preface this book, he had spent about a decade or so amongst the Nahua people in I'm trying to remember the name of the village, but it's right outside of Veracruz, Mexico.
The name of the village is actually hidden. He gave it a different name throughout the book. Yeah.
Gotcha. The name that he gave it was Amatlan, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the language that they speak is Nahuatl, and I'm going to preface this by any words that I speak or mention of Nahuatl I am probably completely butchering, but I'm trying to do my best to stick to original words that they have. But yeah, so it's the Nahua people, and they live in the Central Highlands of Mexico. The book is entitled Corn is Our Blood, Culture and Ethnic Identity in a Contemporary Aztec Indian Village. So they do somewhat identify as Aztecs or Indians. And this identity is very, very close to them, because there are people who do speak their language but don't identify as Nahua people. And one of the things that they pride themselves in their identity is the practicing of their religion. And this practicing of their religion is what sets them apart as natives, opposed to just people who speak their language. And so in the book, Dr. Sandstrom had mentioned a few times that it was very hard for him to get the kind of information that he wanted regarding the religion or religious practices of these people, because it was such a sense of pride for them. However, one thing that I've brought up before in the episode with Samaria during that interview was the idea of like cultural appropriation and taking of things of other religions. And one of the things that the Nahua people had approached him with when he had said, like, yeah, I'm interested in your religion, their first response was, are you trying to make money off of us? So that's one thing that, I hold very, very closely. Like it's cultural appropriation or stealing from someone if you're trying to make money from them. And they thought the same thing. But once he told them, no, I'm not trying to make money. I'm genuinely interested. I want to learn more about your people and your practices. they were overjoyed. And it got to the point where, like, he said in the book that people, if there were rituals that were going on or practices that were going on, they actually had someone who would come and pick his ass up to take into a ritual.
It's time to go to work, buddy.
But one of the things that was difficult for him to, like, actually gain information is amongst their society, like, asking direct questions is perceived as being rude, especially questions about religion. So he had to pick it all up just, like, based on observation or from conversations that he had, but he couldn't ask direct questions about it. Luckily, he spent, like, almost a decade working with these people. And so one of the things that is in here, this book was published in 2006, or it was republished in 2006. This is the copy we have. I don't remember when it was exactly published. Yeah, the online edition was 2012. The first edition was published in 1991.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And one of the things in here is he does refer in, because this was before the essay that we had read in the first episode, not referring to people as shamans, which I was happy that he didn't want to refer to them as shamans, but he kind of does, only because he says in the book that, you know, this is kind of the nomenclature of anthropology, which annoys me, but c'est la vie. The word that he uses in order to describe the religious specialists, though, he does refer to them as shamans, but in their language, in Nahuatl, the name for their religious specialist or religious expert is a Tlamatiquetl, which translates to person of knowledge. So it's Tlamatiquetl, I think, but I don't want to, like, keep butchering that word. So I'll just refer to them as religious expert as I try and do every other time. The interesting thing about the religious experts, though, is that even though the Nahua people see them as having a pivotal role in their society, they are still kind of considered outsiders. I think didn't he say that there were, like, 4 during his entire time that he was there?
Yeah, and that they weren't really present for much of his observations.
Yeah, they were there, but they were the ones who, like, read or, like, followed the rituals and did everything. Their primary role within the society is acting as a curer or healer, but they also do a lot of divination as well. And, like, one of the things that they do with their divination, again, going back to corn is their blood, they do their divination by throwing corn kernels onto like a cigar box that has a cloth on top of it, along with, like, little altar things.
What I found interesting on this practice right here is this is damn near a universal practice of divination. I've seen this method pop up over and over again in ethnographies and in revival practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one thing I like about this is, okay, with the religious experts, they one of the reasons why they're considered outsiders is because they have to learn a lot. You have to learn so many things, and one of them is, like, how they do their divination. It's never done on intuition, like a lot of divination is taught nowadays is just, like, reading cards based on intuition, whatever. These actually have very strict patterns that mean very certain things. And so in the book, he actually has a chart of where different patterns that the corn kernels lay in that indicate certain things. So, like, there's if the corn forms like a U shape, that means that the person has contracted a disease that originates from water.
Well, that one's specifically from a creek bed.
Yeah. Okay. If there's, like, a pile of kernels, that pile indicates that there's a village involved. And, like, overlapping kernels, a musician is needed for the ritual. Like, it's really interesting seeing all of this, like, laid out, and, like, it's kind of intimidating having to learn it would be intimidating having to learn all of these different piles of things, because when a person were to go through the lessons or everything as an apprentice, having to do all of this divination and just I can imagine this person standing over you like, no, what does this fucking mean? What does this fucking mean? I don't know. It's fucking corn. I don't know.
Yeah. Is the corn male or female? That is distinct. You have to know. Is it right to call it male or female in this context? You have to know. Yeah, there was a lot of that in this practice.
One of the other things that was kind of frustrating for me, just because I'm the type of person who, like, when I get into studying something, I want to know the exact answers. He said when he spoke to a lot of the Nahua people about, like, their religion and their cosmology and what they believe, they would always redirect them to one of the religious experts, and then because they didn't like the direct question thing, so they just rerouted over to the religious expert, and then that person would just be like, oh, I don't know. And like they have different realms within their spiritual cosmology. When it boils down to it, a lot of the time the religious expert would just be like, yeah, but man, they're all spirits, and all spirits are the same thing. Like, we're all spirits. So, like, this kind of works with the administrism thing that we've been working with like, recursive consciousness and the Hyloturia thing, in which everything is consciousness, everything is a spirit. So it's not quite animism, because everything is not its own spirit. Like, there's this universal spirit that everything is kind of like a node off of.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the book, it says in Nahua thought the universe is a deified, seamless totality. But in order to understand its nature better, they divide it into 4 interrelated aspects or realms. The first is the earth and everything. And there's the earth, there's the sky, there's the sea, and then there's the Mictlan, which is the place of the dead, wherever, like, everyone goes. Everyone dies there. Unless you died in water. If you died by drowning or something having to do with, or in water or something, then you go to the water realm. So which is considered like paradise. That is considered paradise. So if you drown, you go to paradise. But they never really broke down why water was paradise.
I can tell that's environmental. No, they didn't go into it, but it's absolutely environmental. And when you're they are in a place where water's a little more difficult to come by, hence the name arroyo for the creek bed. It means dry creek. So they don't have water as like a constant for how their environment works. It is fickle, and so that makes water much more important and much more luxurious than it would be for someone in the upper northeast of the USA.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. So you have and everything else has a spirit. Everything has a spirit. So the clouds are represented as like these thunder beings that are the ones that bring the water from the sea to the mountains. And this goes in with the like genius loci thing very much, because he does mention in the book that there are that people can just like glance at the sky and be like, oh yeah, it's going to rain tomorrow. And it didn't look like rain whatsoever, but they could just look at the clouds, see it, and just make a nonchalant kind of comment about, yeah, it'll rain tomorrow, even though it does not look like it. They didn't have they weren't reading like forecasts or anything like that. They just knew it was going to, based on seeing things around them. And like all of the mountains around them had their own spirits. They had their own names. And these were called upon as aspects of the earth, because the earth is pivotal to them. The earth kind of has more, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to them, they believe that the sun was born from the earth.
I didn't pay that close of attention, but I wouldn't doubt it because of the way that their structure is, since things pop off of other things but are still the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if I remember correctly, that the sun was born, or was one of the children of one of the sons of the earth.
Yeah, I did note that it was not like the primary or the creator. It was secondary in this structure.
Yes, because everything to them came from the earth. Everything comes from the earth, and corn to them comes from the earth. And that was where they also have the practice that there was one person, I think his name was, I think they had referred to him as Lazy John.
Yep.
Or something. There was a story that was involved with Lazy John, and he didn't pay all the respect that was needed to corn and dropped a bunch of it, and bad things happened to him. And so, like, if any of the Nahua people drop corn on the ground, they're sure to pick up every last fucking kernel.
Yeah, that is definitely in there. There's also much more about earth and corn. There's a recursion in that. To circle back to our other experiments with recursions, that's something we might want to touch on, is how the corn is the earth and we offer it back.
Yes, because that was one thing. Everything comes from the earth, and so you offer it back. And so they had also said, like, when the people go out drinking or whatever, they make sure that they pour things for the earth. They always offer things back to the earth.
Yeah.
Like, because without the earth, you can't make the alcohol that you're going to be drinking. So you have to give some back to the earth. Everything is given back to the earth. And one of the things that are prided amongst the younger people is how well they're able to take care of their garden.
Oh, I missed that part. Yeah, that's...
Yeah, amongst those people, like, it's amongst the younger ones, you have this plot of land that it is yours, and the better you take care of it, the better you're able to take care of the earth. That's a sign of pride for you, because you're taking care of your mother, you're the one who's giving you everything.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's that it's giving it back to you. So the well taken care of, the result of a well-maintained garden is the earth's approval of what you're doing.
And other aspects of their cosmology is, like, one that if you were very ethnocentric in your approach, you would consider it really bizarre or kind of different from what you're used to, is the fact that they believe that humans have two souls. There are two souls. The first one is what was the word that they used?
I'm looking for it.
It was yolotl, which is translated to literally as heart, but is closer to the idea of your life force. That's the part of your soul that allows you to do things. So, like, that's the part that allows you to taste, that allows you to smell, that allows for all of the senses. The yolotl, according to the book, the yolotl is the heart or essence of an object, being, or spirit, and everything in the universe possesses one. So that's kind of getting into the animism thing. It's that life force. Everything. And so, like, one of the ways of asking people about, like, their decisions or whatever, they'll say, what does your yolotl say? What does that divine spark say about the situation? And then the second part of the soul is the tonali, and that is that is their word for heat, and that one's a little harder to define, because that's like what your consciousness is. That consciousness is broken up into 14 different parts, which, again, that's a lot to kind of take in, but it's like everything has different animals also have this as well, but based on what animal it is, they are sometimes stronger than humans in certain aspects, because one of those segments is stronger. And so when you're feeding yourself or taking care of yourself, you are strengthening your tonali, which you are strengthening that personality, that sense of self, that body heat. So when you feed yourself corn, you are increasing your body heat. You are bringing that kind of individuality into it. You're feeding that individuality. But other examples of, I was incorrect. The tonali in humans is broken into 7 parts, but in other animals they can be broken up into 14 different parts. So in humans we have 7, but in other animals they have up to 14. So that's why they're sometimes stronger than us. So the example that they gave were scorpions and snakes have venom. We do not. So they have some other aspect of that tonali.
And the 7-part soul is not exclusive to this culture. This pops up again in some parts of Hebrew practices and Christian practices. Okay. So there's 7 parts to the face of God or the soul of God. There's also 7 parts to the human aspect. This pops up a lot, where your soul isn't just one single thing, it's different parts of the same thing.
Okay, that's interesting. I was unaware of the segmented part within Judaism.
It's deep stuff.
As far as the soul.
Yeah, it's one of those things you have to get deep into the Kabbalah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And go with the Nahua people. One of the ways that you can represent a spirit or represent this aspect in other things, which is one of the more fascinating aspects of their practice that I think I've mentioned before, was their cutting up of paper spirits.
Oh yeah.
This was like super interesting to me.
This is interesting. I accidentally do this in a very similar format. I use origami to put intention into paper and to do sigils. And it was funny to watch this pop up here too.
So how they do it is the best way that I can describe it, as they said that, or in the book, it says the abstract nature is made more understood through the art of portraying specifics as cut up paper figures. So what the cut up is essentially, like, the best way I can describe it is, remember when you were a kid and you like fucking folded up paper and took scissors to it in order to make snowflakes? That's essentially what they're doing, except they're making them into like humanoid figures. So they have these ritual paper images. These ritual paper images, like each, again, this is one of those things that a religious expert has to fucking know, is how they are all represented. So like we had already said that like the different mountains have their own spirits. And so like you would have to know what the spirit of that mountain looks like. You would have to know what the spirit of the certain village looks like. You would have to know what a fire spirit looks like. And so, and like any of the death or evil spirits, those ones are connotated by coloring them with charcoal, by rubbing charcoal on the paper and then turning it black. But in the book, it has a completely non-exhaustive list of all of these different spirits, how they're all cut up and how they look, and they are really interesting to look at. But it says at the end, like, you have these super intricate ones, like involving the sun or the moon or stars, and they're like tapestries, sort of. They, like, if it were laid out, honestly, it would look like a fucking decorative doily or whatever, but it's cut up and made of paper.
The tortilla napkins.
Yeah, okay. And so with these, like, he says in the book that you have these religious experts who've been doing it for so fucking long. Like, despite how intricate that this is, they're able to cut up dozens of them within like an hour. Just completely going nuts. And so what they do with these is, with the rituals, or if they're trying to appease a spirit or work with that spirit, they'll cut up these different ones and then hang them on their altars in order to like make a bond between this paper thing, or this paper effigy sort of, and the spirit that they're trying to summon with it. And so it's like calling this spirit into the ritual space. That's really one thing that, or like the biggest aspect that I would want to take away in order to bring into my practice. I know you had said that you already kind of do something like that, but this is one thing that I would suggest for other people to possibly try and do. Can you kind of elaborate on what your practice is with the origami?
It's basically writing out my intent over and over again on the inside of the paper in such a way that it covers the whole sheet. At that point, it will be transformed to charge it, because I can't pay attention very well when I'm writing, so I can't write and charge at the same time. I can do one or the other, but I can fold and charge at the same time. So I use that opportunity to put the intention further into the paper. And after I'm done with that, I'll let it sit around a while, just like you do with your classic chaos magic sigil stuff. And when I'm ready, I set it on fire.
Oh, interesting.
Now, the effectiveness, I can't tell you if it's very effective, because I always forget what I was doing when I started it.
No, that's fair. I mean, within chaos magic, that's kind of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to kind of like set it and forget it, because it's that. And this is one thing I've spoken about in like Hyloturia, with that theory, that what we're kind of doing is, and the reason why lust for result kind of fucking ruins what you're trying to do, is because consciousness itself is craving novelty. And when you're lusting for a result or thinking for a result, okay, so this is the bit that I've written about this on Hyloturia. Consciousness exists to experience. Lust for result ruins magic, because the more one desires a specific outcome, the more your individual consciousness experiences an experience. As above, so below. Our individual consciousness, our brain, is the microcosm of the universal consciousness. Just as we hate boredom, it hates boredom. So rather than relive the lifetime of experience one already imagines more and more each time you fantasize over the result that you want, which makes it more real, the universal consciousness would rather experience that which it doesn't know rather than what it is already fleshed out and structured a scaffolding for. So by lusting for that result, you're ruining your chances of it happening because you're already experiencing what your life is going to be like with that outcome already set.
Yeah, which is why, like, if you keep, in some frameworks, you can do the envisionment thing and it works, but in this framework, it's the opposite. So it's the forgetting that is important to the action.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it still works within that concept of envisioning something happening. But the thing is like, if you're constantly envisioning it, constantly doing it, you're focusing more of your energy on like wishing that it would happen rather than going out and doing the work that needs to be done in order to get that thing to happen.
Yeah.
Like you're not, by sitting there and just envisioning it, by sitting there and just like hoping that it happens and focusing all of your work and consciousness on trying to do that, instead you're not allowing it a means of manifestation.
Yeah, and this can be, if anyone listening wants to practice this can be demonstrated if you think about something really dumb that you want, just like a food item that's very fun and delicious and you shouldn't have it, but you want it. If you think hard enough about it and is very envisioned as you can be about it, you can pretty much satisfy your craving for it without having it.
Interesting.
I do this with nicotine a lot.
That. Huh. That's a really interesting way of doing it. Just sit there and focus on the sensation of it enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that tracks really well.
Are you tired of listening to podcasts about the crazy shit magic enthusiasts did in the past? You wish you could throw down and cut loose like the Thelemites of old in a non-judgmental, completely liberated environment of an Indiana cornfield. Well, now you can. Introducing the Babylon Rising Festival, a place for occultists of all kinds who come together to perform and discuss magic, ritual, and live the law of Thelema in a clothing-optional, primitive camping environment. Babylon Rises encourages self-exploration, spontaneous ritual, and lively magic. The festival runs from June 9th to 11th, 2023. Anyone over the age of 21 is welcome to attend, and they can go to BabylonRising.com for more nitty-gritty details about location and time, and the schedule of events and rituals laid down by the psychotic, pseudo-intellectual batshit ramblings of Master Aleister Crowley. You can also find the Babylon Rising Facebook group where you can connect with other possible attendees to make plans, throw together ride shares, or what have you. Mark your calendar and join us this June for the Babylon Rising Festival, where you can live your best, or worst, life. That's your decision. The Babylon Rising Festival is ages 21 and up. Clothing is optional. The Babylon Rising Festival has been known to cause happiness, sadness, anger, joy, delirium, drunkenness, debauchery. The Babylon Rising Festival may not include decency unless you bring it with you. The Babylon Rising Festival ain't free. Get your tickets at the website. Barter and vendor opportunities available. Experiences may vary. The Babylon Rising Festival is not responsible for feeding your pets while you're out of town. Childcare is your problem. Why would you want to have kids anyway? We're going to be at the Babylon Rising Festival for a good time, not a long time. Where you go after the festival is up to you. YOLO. No YOLO. The Babylon Festival is not responsible for the death of Bob Crane. The Babylon Festival does not explicitly deny any involvement in the death of Bob Crane. Up, up, down, down, left, right, A, B, A, B, start. The Babylon Rising Festival may or may not include the appearance of Egyptian gods no one's ever heard of before. All proceeds come out of your pocket and into ours. The Babylon Rising Festival is not responsible for any unseen entities that may follow you home afterwards. You're as cold as ice. You're willing to sacrifice our love. No, officer, I was never even on that plane. The Babylon Rising Festival. Grab your gear, pack your tent, and come experience the magic.
But going back to these paper images, this is something that I would suggest people listening doing or trying to incorporate into their practice. So the different spirits have different purposes. There are the winds that come in and can cause people to be sick. And so what they'll do is they will have like a spirit of what's called like the corpse wind. And this wind travels around the world spreading disease and misfortune. And so what they'll do, they'll set this up as kind of like, okay, you're already here. You don't need to come with your actual sickness. They'll set it up around the outside of the ritual space. And like, you don't need to come here. You're already here. You don't need to spread your actual sickness. But then like in other aspects, they'll have it where it's like, okay, you're here and we do actually need you. They'll set it up like closer around the inside of the house. Whereas like things that you're trying to ward away, you have on the outside of the house because that is where they'll come. That is where they are. They don't need to go any further. Whereas this other one, this figure is cut by the cure as part of an offering to protect the newborn child. When the umbilical cord is buried at the house door, this spirit comes from the sky realm, and it will this offering distracts the wind spirit and removes it from the surroundings. Whereas other ones, like they'll have the spirit, and they'll specifically put it as like right above their house, or the entryway to their house, in order to offer that spirit to come in.
Yeah, there we go.
I think one thing that like you can do as an individual practice, especially if you're working with your genius loci, figure out what your genius loci looks like. You don't necessarily have to do the same thing of cutting up like an actual like effigy of it, but having kind of like its sigil or something like that, and doing something in the same way. Like, get familiar enough with the image of what your genius loci looks like, so that way you could draw it on an in a moment's notice and set it up where you need it in order to call upon that genius loci.
Yeah, and the way that you figure this out, it will come to you. Just be quiet, sit with it. It will pop into your head. It's going to figure you out. You're going to figure it out. Don't stress over looking for signs around you. It will happen.
Mm-hmm. And like this, it could be like, because they have different like paper images. They have one representing the spirit of the sun, but then they also have the ones that you had mentioned, like the tortilla napkins. These hold like different images. They look extremely decorative. They're kind of like artistic representation. They kind of look like as you would like a blanket or something like that. And these same ones also represent things like the sun or the moon or different stars. These are used in like different curing rituals and things like that, where you have essentially like the central image and all of these other decorative aspects as part of it that are kind of placed in order to, in like the curing ritual or on the altar, you would have it there in order to bring that sun or the moon there to help you with every aspect that it has, not just the aspect of that spirit. Because one of the things with the Nahua spirits is as there are lots of them, they also have lots of different aspects as well. So there's like there's one aspect of this mountain that represents the fire within the mountain, but then there's another aspect of the mountain that also represents the water being brought into the village from the mountain. And what they do in order to kind of like animate these things, these figures, to fully represent what they are, is they add a heart into the center of them that kind of gives it one of the aspects of their souls. And so by doing that, that is what activates it as a representation of the spirit itself, rather than just something that represents it. They give it that heart. They give it something that gives that spirit life.
Also, I want to add that when they say mountain, they mean that mountain, the one right there next to him. It's a specific thing. It's not just mountains or an abstract concept of mountains. It means the one that you can climb up that's in their backyard.
Yes, that mountain in particular. And they have different spirits for each mountain. Each one has its own name. Each one represents a different thing. Because I know that there was one mountain that any ritual that is performed involving the sun, because the sun, as we had kind of mentioned, plays a secondary aspect to the earth. So the people in Nahua don't necessarily they don't venerate the sun as much as a lot of other cultures do. And so any rituals involving the sun are done by religious experts in secret. He says in the book that he was not able to participate in one of these rituals because it was just the religious expert that does it. Nobody else in the village does it. It's just them, and they do it in private to the sun.
Yeah, and that could be because if you put too much, I'm speculating here, if you put too much energy into the thing that does a lot of damage to your neighborhood, you might cause some problems.
Right.
So the
and
sun
that tracks.
The sun is the one that can deliver a lot of problems to this region.
Yeah, so it was the sun that can delivers a lot of problems, and they also mentioned that a lot of wind causes problems.
Yeah.
So a lot of the disease-carrying aspects are represented by wind. You have disease wind, you have corpse winds, you have all these shitty winds.
Yeah, and that also harkens to other cultures because I think they even use the term malaries in here, which is the root for malaria. I can't remember exactly what page they said this on, but I do recall that they mention malaries in here.
Which, I mean, that makes sense. They do have other aspects that pull from other cultures, and like one of the ones that was shocking was one of their words for evil spirits is the is the word for Jew, which is extremely unfortunate. But he does explain in the book that even though a lot of most of the Nahua people aren't even aware that Jews are an ethnic group of people or a religious group of people, they still use that word, and he says that it comes from colonialism.
Yeah.
And the conquistadors coming and denigrating the Jews as those who killed Christ. And so they just kind of picked up on that. Well, the Jews killed Christ, the Jews killed the Son, and so they're bad, evil things. Which is really fucking horrible aspect of colonialism.
It happens a lot. Yeah, it's like you can't even be mad about it because they don't know.
Right. You can't be mad about it because they don't know, but at the same time, it's like they do have other words. They do have other words for evil spirits. God damn, that was really rough reading. And then at the speaking of really rough reading, getting to the very end of the book was also very rough reading.
Yeah, and that's why when you said this was from 91, that it made total sense at that point, because I remember when this era was starting where this particular group was starting missions in other places, and they usually didn't do that. It was new to that particular religious group. And you go ahead and tell your side of how you see this.
I mean, I just saw it as it was a weaponization of religion, and it was kind of like a routing out of old things and just like trying to force all of these people who were already somewhat considered outsiders within the larger community of like Veracruz, Mexico. They were already seen as outsiders because they were native people, and it was a way of going in and weaponizing religion and conformity in order to get rid of people and cleansing them.
And remember what happened politically around that point in time?
Not off the top of my head, no.
You were probably very young. It was the NAFTA.
Oh, so yes, that's right.
Mexico used to keep the lands for native peoples in native hands, and NAFTA erased a lot of the laws that protected native land holdings. And at that point, Americans started flooding into Mexico, taking farm territories for commercial farming. And in the process of doing that, they also targeted not just the outsiders of the culture, but the outsiders of the outsiders, which was your drunks, your people who were in debt, people who already had scars against their psyche socially, and used those people to infiltrate and divorce people from their spiritual relationship with the land.
God damn.
So it's a heavy genocide. It goes back to that kill the Indian, save the man shit. You see this happen over and over again, and that's when this happened. It was around the same time as NAFTA. I remember this starting up and this all occurring around then. So look through like the news stories from this era and see how it plays out.
No, that tracks, yeah.
I don't think NAFTA happened in 91, but the lead up it started well before that.
Right. And yeah, it goes into there, like there was already the ethnic identity of these people being like, as these people, they had to like form strategies in order to work with a wider community, because they were already like being paid half as much as someone who was not Nahua. And so like, yeah, knowing that they were already at that point, but they had something that the rest of Mexico wanted, which was the land. Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, they needed their in, and that's how they got it, was with the bottom of the bottom. Which, look around in our own culture. Where do you see that occurring? I see it popping up a lot with a lot of identity movements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. So apart from that extremely tragic ending, was there anything else that you took away from this ethnography that was poignant to you?
We're going to circle back to what I said last episode, was that the respect for the plant itself. Yes, it is the thing they eat. It is the thing that sustains them. It is also their mother, their wife, their child. They have it integrated into all the aspects of their life in a very respectful fashion. It's not just a commodity to them. It is what they do, and it is how they live. And I think that that's something I want to focus on myself as far as my relationship to plants go. Right now, my mentality around plants is they are my little children, kind of, but to treat them as equals is where I'm working up to.
And one way that you could potentially do that is they have, as we'd mentioned, everything has a spirit, everything has a soul. They have, that's mentioned in here, the seed spirits are ranked by the villagers according to their importance. Not surprisingly, corn is most paramount. When I was allowed to examine the seeds in a religious expert cedar chest, I found that the overwhelming majority were portrayals of varieties of corn. So they had male and female aspects to corn. There were spirits involving the corn, but they also had stories based on individual varieties of corn. So we had mentioned Lazy John and not taking care of the corn itself. Like, one of the things that the story involved with was there was a fire that started taking out all of this different corn. And because he was lazy and didn't take care of things, the thunder and lightning spirits came to prevent the corn from burning. And the different varieties of corn indicate how close they were to the fire. All the corn up until that time was white in color, and white corn in the village is descended from the grains that escaped entirely. Yellow corn was that corn that was just singed by the fire. Red was fully exposed to the flames, and black corn was descended by those that were nearly destroyed by the fire. And then that entire myth of the different varieties of corn also explains how these people perceive the different varieties that are desirable to them. So white corn is obviously the most desirable, with it slowly going down until you get that corn that just barely escaped the fire being black. That underlying myth has to do with how they perceive corn. Like, if you're not paying attention to the corn, something bad will happen, and then you're going to be left with this shitty corn that you don't really want. So you have to take care of your corn, which then goes back to them having to take care of their gardens and how important it is to take care of the earth. And so there's this reciprocity that exists between that they recognize and they understand. And you pay attention to that land that you are involved in, and you pay attention to it so fucking much because it is what is taking care of you. And in order to be a human that exists within the world, within this earth that is taking care of you simply because you were born, and you have to give back to that earth.
Yeah, they also offered, I love that they offered alcohol to the earth. That is something we need to bring back. Pouring one out for your mommies.
Yes, your fucking earth mommy. Just pour, and any time that they would drink, some of it went out there. This can go back, we have on our place, we have an altar to the land. And so what we do with that altar is we give things to the land on that altar that the land has given to us. Times when we would have certain, a good crop, which last year we had so many goddamn tomatoes. Tomatoes grew really well last year. We offered some of the tomatoes on that altar to the land because it is what gave us those tomatoes, which completely, sort of tangentially related. I did learn that the word tomato comes from a Nahua word.
Oh yeah.
And what it translates to is fat thing, which I love that. The tomato is just fat thing.
I wonder so tlacuache is the word for possum, and I wonder what it means now that I'm thinking about it. Because possum means white dog. I wonder if it's something goofy like dumb dog.
Yeah, it probably is, because they're exceedingly sweet and dumb.
Yeah.
But I think that's all I have to say about the Nahua and how you can bring that into your own practice, apart from the obvious, like, take care of your land because it's taking care of you. I did like how you had mentioned treating the spirits or the entity of that plant as an equal to yourself. And in some ways, like, not only an equal, but like as a superior, because it is taking care of you. It is feeding you and keeping you alive. Whereas, well, and I mean in the same aspect that you are keeping it alive as well by tending to it. So yeah, equal would be good. Apart from that, and then doing like a cutout or some kind of paper effigy to your genius loci, or to, if you want to go further past the genius loci and start working with individualized spirits or entities or consciousness of different plants, then go nuts on that, and creating ones for those things to put around the altar. So like if you're working on harvest or whatever, or you're planting, it's springtime now, so you're planting things and hoping for a good harvest, have a cutout or an effigy or something for that plant and invite it into your home, so that way you can give offerings to it and tend to its spirit along with its body that you have out in the garden.
Also, if you are an urbanist, and I mean deep urbanist, like your patio dwelling type, you can do this work. This does not exclude you. You just have to do a little more effort to bring the earth to you. You need to look at yourself not as an urbanist, but as a cliff dweller. And that's a perspective that people forget. They think they're divorced from the nature around them. You absolutely are not. I've watched birds make nests in people's flower boxes up on like the 20th story of buildings here. You can make this work for you, just to let you know.
Even with something as simple as, pouring one out for Earth. Like you can do that, but you absolutely do have nature. And this is one thing I have a friend who we were talking about this podcast and what we're doing with it. And she lives in the middle of fucking New York, in the middle of New York City. And so there were some aspects she's like, well, I can't do that. But when we started talking about what we're going to just now kind of segue into, she was like, no, I absolutely can do that within my apartment.
And apartments without patios are just terrariums. You just got to make the light work for you. You can still do this.
And that's very important for you to bring up, because like we want you to be able to do this regardless of where you are living. Like you are still part of the earth. You are still there. And I did like your analogy of being a cliff dweller. So moving into what more you can do at home, we're moving into the next segment of a kind of homesteading project that you can do. And I mentioned it last time, and this is the first one in this series, which will be making kombucha. And so I've been doing this for a while now. It's a fantastically easy thing to do, and it's a healthy drink. It is a probiotic. It helps your gut. But one of the nice things about it is that you can incorporate other magical things into it. So as we'll talk in the next sort of segment, and then further ones in the future, like different plants have different magical aspects to it, you can incorporate different magical aspects into your kombucha. So if like a fruit or something has a particular aspect to it, you can incorporate it into your kombucha with just the addition of that into the drink. So how do you make it? We just went ahead, and the easiest way to start doing it on your own is to buy a bottle of kombucha. Just go out and buy it. A lot of people will suggest that you just buy a bottle of plain kombucha, because this is going to be easier, because it doesn't have anything added to it that can affect they can be affected by any further additions that you add to it. But what my wife and I did was we started off with a bottle of Kirkland's lemon ginger kombucha. And the reason we started off with this one was because I know a lot of the times the SCOBY, or the symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast that forms this, that does all of the work for the kombucha in fermenting the tea, can be very affected by acid environments. So we wanted one that started off from a very heavy acid environment, so that if we had to add any, or that if we had or wanted to add anything that was more acidic, it would be fine. And so what you'll do is you just drink most of the bottle, and then at the bottom of it, you'll notice that there's some settlement and shit like that. In order to start working on your own SCOBY, you just brew some tea. I think we started off brewing about half a gallon of it, or a couple liters, and we brewed some black tea, let it get down to room temperature, add about I think the rule is generally about a cup of sugar to a gallon of water. So you'd use about half a cup, starting with 2 gallons, and then you pour in that kombucha from the bottle, and then just put a cheesecloth or a very thinly woven cloth over top of it, rubber band the jar that you're putting it on, which you can do it in depending on your jar. We got one of the gallon-sized pickle jars that works really well, and then put that over it, rubber band the top, and then just let it sit there. Let it sit there and keep it at room temperature, put it somewhere dark, and then after a couple weeks, you will have... ours actually took a little longer because it did start from that acidic environment, so it took longer for it to grow, but you'll end up with this slimy, white, brownish puck at the top. And that slimy, white, brownish puck at the top is your SCOBY. And that is what you will use in order to continue making kombucha. Now, with it being fermented tea, I've been asked before, is there alcohol in it? Yes, there is, but it's at less than 0.5% alcohol by volume. And so because it is less than 0.5% alcohol by volume, it is not a regulated drink within the United States. And so that's why anyone can just go out and buy a bottle of kombucha. But you don't taste the alcohol in it whatsoever. And the thing is after it gets past that 0.5%, if it starts getting more than that, that's when the SCOBY just starts turning the thing to vinegar. So if you leave your SCOBY in too long, your kombucha will turn into vinegar, and it is very potent vinegar. What you do after doing that, or after you get your SCOBY, after getting the SCOBY, I didn't bother with the kombucha that I had, because I wasn't sure whether or not that it had turned to vinegar or not yet, because it was just growing. But then you'll brew another thing of tea, same kind of ratio, 1 gallon to 1 cup of water, and then you'll put your SCOBY in there and let it sit for about a week or two. After about 7 days, that's when you'll want to start tasting it to see whether or not it's at the flavor that you want. Once it's at the flavor that you want, then you just brew another batch, move your SCOBY to another one, and let it start working while you have this kombucha now. Once you have that kombucha, then you can mix it with whatever fruit juice or fruits that you want, or herbs or things like that. The one that we most recently did was an apple cider kombucha. So you can add more sugar to it at this point. I wouldn't suggest doing so, but that's my own personal taste, because there's already a lot of sugar in fruit juice. Then once you mix that all together and you strain out any leftover of the seeds or anything, because what I would do is if you're doing blueberry or something like that, I would just blend it all up in a food processor and then mix it in and then strain it out. Once you're left with just that, then you can bottle it. After you bottle it, you put it in, you cap it, make sure that it's sealed, and leave it sit there for a couple days. This goes through a second fermentation, and that second fermentation and having that pressure in there, in the bottle, is what's going to give it that effervescence and that that carbonated nature of the kombucha that I personally enjoy. And I drank way too much soda when I was younger, but now I just drink a shitload of kombucha because it's the same thing. It's nature's soda. It's nice and sweet and has it's a probiotic drink, as I'd mentioned, and it's nice and effervescent with the carbon dioxide if I'm not just drinking, soda water from my seltzer can. But yeah, so that is one thing that you can do at home. Anyone can do it. Just go and buy a bottle of kombucha. Start doing it. All you'll need is some form of black tea. We've been using oolong tea, but you can use black tea, red tea, yellow tea, white tea. You can use oolong, and then just let it sit and ferment. And then during the second fermentation, add whatever juice or magical aspect that you want, and other things that you can kind of do magically with the kombucha. If you are wanting a specific intent behind it, you can draw a sigil on the side of the jar for like what you're brewing this thing with, what kind of intention you're brewing it with, so that way the more you drink it, the more like that intent comes into your life. So if, as I had mentioned, you happen to drink a lot of soda or something and you want to get past that, or because I know a couple people around this area who do have that problem where it's like it's soda or nothing, which is weird, but you want to get past that, you draw your fucking sigil to get over that, and as you drink more kombucha, you'll start craving other things less. And then you can also add in other health benefits from other fruits and vegetables. Yeah, you can have vegetable juice in there. That works. Fruits, vegetables, spices, and put that in there whatever intent you want, and like just look up what kind of correspondence that the fruit or whatever has with that, with a magical aspect, and add that in. You can help, buy like you want to be a healthier person for something, like go with a fruit that works certain things for, like your kidneys. Like blueberries are really great for your kidneys and helping that out. So like you want better kidney health, add in blueberries and have that sigil on the side. Like I want this kombucha to help my kidneys. Put that intent into it as you're brewing it and then go with it that way. You can do that in any place where you're living, and you will end up with so much more SCOBY than you know what to do with. Like we started from one bottle, and now we've been freezing kombucha, the kombucha SCOBYs, because we're getting into a thing where we've heard people cook with them. I've taken a bite out of a raw one, which disgusted my fucking wife. Yeah, I just grabbed the puck and took a bite out of it, just to see what it was like. It was just a gooey, vinegary tasting, kind of like a couch cushion. It was just like a slimy couch cushion that tasted like vinegar.
It is.
That's the best way I can describe it. Yeah. And so you can cook with it, and we have a shitload of SCOBY that just started from one bottle. So if you're not giving it out to people, you can cook with it. You can actually make leather out of it as well. That's one thing that we learned. You can make a vegan leather out of SCOBY. So there are a lot more things that you can get out of it other than just the drink, which makes it particularly good if you're wanting to do like a self-sufficient homesteading sort of thing. Like kombucha is a really, really good way to start with this. And if you want to avoid the whole alcohol concept or aspect, because I know several people who just don't want to ingest alcohol, that's fine. You can still use this SCOBY like vinegar mother in order to create vinegar. Just leave it sit in there for longer than that week or two. Just leave it sit in and it will turn itself into vinegar, and you can use that vinegar for all sorts of things. You can use it for cleaning, you can use it for cooking, you can use it for whatever. There will be no trace of alcohol in it after it's turned into vinegar. So yeah, that's one thing you can do in urban or rural environment. You can do it out here in the sticks. You can do it in your apartment in New York City. So that's what I've got with our homesteading section.
Also, to add to that, the vinegar that you're going to produce is going to be it's going to be closer to apple cider vinegar because it's malate heavy. It's not so much like white vinegar, which is acetate heavy. So if you're doing things that require specific chemistries, keep that in mind when you use it, if you use it in such a manner.
Very true. Yes. Thank you for that. So now on to our next segment. You can fucking take hold of this. We are talking about plants. What plant do we have on the roster?
Okay, so it is specifically the landrace of Tobacco rustica called mapacho, which comes to us from south of the United States border, but the species itself pretty much covers both continents. The same species is called Midiwiwan tobacco in my region, but these are going to be land races of the same species. This one's very interesting. The seeds itself went around the world before they got to me, so they got to get a full tour of Europe and South America before I saw them. Mapacho is the tobacco that was used for religious endeavors. So anytime there is a smoke offering, a tobacco offering in the South American cultures, they're going to use cured rolled chunks of the leaves of this plant And it's used in a variety of ways, but it is an offering. It is used to spiritually cleanse things. It is a very gregarious plant. And what I mean by that is when I grew it myself, it was more than ready to go. Of all the plants, of all the things that I'm working on in my Genius Loci experiment, this one was very happy to be involved. It is big, it is beautiful, and it's still freezing outside, and this plant is just happy about this. One thing to keep in mind when you're working with stuff like tobacco is there's a lot of history here. There's multiple types of tobaccos, and that term can be used for multiple items. We're using it for the mapacho, the rustica right now, but it is also the word for the kind that we use for making cigarettes, the Virginia species. It is also used for a type of dogwood that grows real short, and you can also strip the inner bark out and smoke it, so that gets called tobacco also. The word itself is muddled. The history is just completely clouded, but it is used today to refer to the offerings that are exchanged between two cultures. So if somebody is to say to bring you their tobacco, it is the offering that they think is relevant to the interaction you're about to have. And in some cultures, they will judge you on the quality and type of what they're calling your tobacco. To grow this plant, you're going to want some warm summers. It prefers hot summers, but warm summers are sufficient. It needs a short grow period. It gets really big really fast. And if you were thinking about growing some, if you're in the Northeast, you can start right now with seeding stuff out. If you're in the Southeast, it's already too late. But these grow very effective in any kind of soil. They do accumulate heavy metals to some degree, so be very careful where you're planting these. Like if you're in Pittsburgh, be really cognizant of what's in your dirt. But as far as the plant goes spiritually, it is not lost, but we need to be talking to it. It's happy to see us, and I really do recommend growing it just because of how willing it was to jump to the task for me. As far as anything else goes on it, if you are looking at other species, be aware that cultivation changes your aspects of your plants and your grow conditions. I was growing the Mediwi one and the Mapacho to see if the local cultivars were stronger than the general South American cultivars. It seems to not really matter for it. They're both quite effective at what they do. And if you are joining in on my project, know that this is the one that is mandatory, and it is just a really good way for us to all communicate. If we can look at this plant and understand it, and we can start to understand a little bit more about the cultures that already occupy the space. And by that, I mean the tobacco and the people that were here and the land that was here. These were all here for a very long time before we were. So there's something already going on between them, and that's something you need to pay attention to when you're doing these kind of magical frameworks. That's it for me.
So as far as tobacco goes, I have some background in working with it. Traditionally, it's used very often as a gift for the dead. So it's like, as you had said, this is a good thing to be using for like spiritual offerings and things like that. Another thing that I would like to add, if you do intend on using it for like ritual smoking, make sure that you cure it, that you don't dry it. There's a vast difference between those two. If you just dry it out, it's going to be bitter and it will probably make you sick. You have to cure it. And in order to cure it, basically you just hang up the leaves and have some like airflow over them, which is like you'll see in for like industrial tobacco use. They'll just take the leaves and hang them up in a barn, and that barn has wind flowing through it. If you're doing it in a smaller space, like I did it in my office, or if you're doing it in an apartment or whatever, have it hanging up and then put a fan on low behind it and then let it cure that way. When it's cured, it will have the texture of kind of like leather. It'll still be pliable and stuff like that. Whereas if you dry it, it's just going to, like if you use a dehydrator, or if you try and dry it in an oven or whatever too quickly, it will like be crunchy and kind of crumble. That's not what you're looking for. You don't want a crumbly texture. You want the kind of soft, cured, smokable texture if that's what you're going to use it for. Another thing that I would like to add is that with the other species that you had mentioned, like the Nicotiana tabacum, which is what is used in like cigarettes and industrial or commercial tobacco, that comes in at around 3% nicotine by weight, whereas Nicotiana rustica comes in generally at around 9%. So most of the time when it's sold online, or if you're looking for it from another source, they're going to sell it as an herbicide, not as something that you're going to want to ingest. But the only reason for that is because it does have a significantly higher nicotine content by weight.
It also takes 3 times longer to cure than the common species. So keep that in mind. If you're going to cure it yourself, you need a 3-year timeline to get a good cure on these things. I have not purchased any online because of the ethics of that, but it is available as in ceremonial logs. But I would recommend doing it yourself just to give it a shot.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the only thing that I wanted to add. It's really great for spirit offerings or any offering traditionally, and there's more nicotine in rustica or mapacho. There's a lot more of it. Like it's used in, as you had mentioned, like smoke ceremonies. It was also used in like Amazonian ritual snuff, things like that, but it does have a much higher nicotine content. And then make sure you cure it if you're going to use it for that, because curing is important. Because if you just take the green leaf and dry it, like it's going to be shitty. It's kind of a waste of tobacco, honestly. I've grown it here on my property before, but I wasn't able to get a whole lot of it because we had this fucking deer come and eat my entire fucking tobacco plant.
They love it.
Yeah, so if you are growing it, be sure to have a fucking fence or something to keep the goddamn deer out, because they will eat the whole thing, and then you will be left with like a 4-5 foot stalk of nothing that you can use, and it's stupid.
Yeah, and just, tend your garden. Pay attention to what's around you. I have a family of 6 deer. I also have a fence that is 6 feet high, and they can't get into it.
Good, because fuck them.
Yeah.
But I think that is it for this month's episode, this one. For the next episode, we already know what we're going to be covering. We will be covering the Slovak Roma, coming from the book Svinia and Black and White. So if you want to join us on our Discord, we will put links to that, but you can join us in the conversation involving the new book and about anything that you have learned from this one or want to take away from this episode. We would love to hear from you. So yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Pythia?
Oh, and if you already are in this world that we're exploring and want to talk to us, we are more than ready to talk to you.
Oh yeah. Yes. Absolutely. But I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Administrism Podcast. If you enjoyed what you've heard, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/administrism. If you'd like to reach out to Yara or Pythia, send us an email at ministrism@gmail.com. To see what other projects Yara is up to, visit wizardtraders.co. The Administrism Podcast is part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network. To learn more and find other great podcasts, visit greenmushroomproject.com.